Hello. Oh, wait, my phone just popped up and said we're live on LinkedIn. Are we live on LinkedIn?
We're live on LinkedIn for Leaders Eat Last. So thanks for joining us all for this month's installment of Bits and Books. So if you haven't joined us, this is our third episode, I believe. We did 2 episodes getting warmed up with Getting Naked. I swear it's a book, right? Patrick Lencioni. So if you haven't checked that out already, check out our commentary on that. We all voted last time. And we picked Leaders Eat Last. And when I say we all, I mean, if you're listening, we've got a poll for you to vote as well. So it's not just those of us on the call that voted. And I will start today because I decided we'll take the first sets of votes from last time. So we're always voting a whole month ahead. So I could announce at the beginning of the call what the next book is. So before we jump into Simon Sinek's Leaders Eat Last, the next book will be Marcus Sheridan, They Ask You Answer. Okay, so Simon Sinek, Leaders Eat Last. Simon Sinek had me at why, which if you've read his Start With Why is all about, and I believe this is a sales philosophy, which is funny because Kyle and I just chatted sales philosophy. If people believe in your why, they'll buy your what. Mm-hmm. And so I actually got onto Leaders Eat Last. When my daughter went to college, she was a business major with entrepreneurship and leadership. And I got to read her version, which you can't see, but it is well lined and highlighted, etc., on its way through. And I thought by the title Leaders Eat Last, I was like, yep, I get it. Okay, put your team first, right? So I was like, he wrote 300 and some odd pages about that. And I felt like the title said it all, but it in fact did not say it all. So I'm going to have everybody introduce themselves. I've already shown you, again, I got my notes from my daughter, but I also took some notes. So I'd like you to introduce yourself. And then the question I'd like you to ask is, how do you consume books and what do you do to process it in terms of notes or what do you do to process it? So I'm just going to go around the horn as I see you on my Zoom. Kyle, you're up first.
My name is Kyle Spooner. I'm a director of operations at an MSP, Quantum Telecom Technologies. I'm also the vice president of MSP Geek, a free online community for MSPs. So it's interesting, the how you digest books question, because I love audiobooks. However, I do not love them if they're business books. That is the only exception. Like, because I have Audible, I have an Audible subscription, and I love just pressing a button and getting a new book and listening to it and having a good time. But with business books, because of the way I go back and read and interpret them, I like to sit down, read them, and stop and process bits at a time. Because when I get to a specific point, and I'm like, I want to ponder what was said and what was taught or what was gone over, it feels like I'll get a better grasp of it instead of trying to go through the whole book through the whole time, because then I feel like I miss things. So if I chunk it up a little bit, it allows me to get a better reading on the situation.
Lisa, you're up next. What say you?
I'm Lisa Marie Papp. I'm the owner of CSN, Computer Solutions and Networking. I consume books. Basically, when I read, I take notes. And what I try to do is sometimes it's a balance between what is actually written to if it produces a thought of my own. And then that's where that'll get a star or something, so that when I come back to it, then I go that aha moment. And I truly believe what you said earlier in regards to the why to the what. I find when I approach my clients or potential clients, especially, is I tell them my why. And I guarantee you 9 times out of 10, that's why they actually choose CSN.
Yep. Tim?
Yeah, so Tim Golden, founder of Compliance Risk, soon to be Compliance Scorecard, where we've solved the governance problem for MSPs and their clients. How I consume books is audio. I am an auditory learner, so I know if I sit and try to read, I will get absolutely, like, I see red, I get frustrated really hard. So, but when words are spoken to me or I hear them, I consume it at a much higher rate. I retain it at a much higher rate. And some of the ways that I tend to interpret that or internalize what I hear during listening to a book is I may take some notes. I may pull some clips out of the Audible app, and I may, rely on book clubs like this to get feedback from others as well.
Thanks. Chris, how about you?
Hi, I'm Chris Dix. I'm a software developer and founder of ChatStyle, where we make chat-based automation and communication software for MSPs. And I like Kindle. I have a ton of books on my Kindle that I'm going through, but this is only the second. I didn't really read business books before this book club, so it's been a learning experience, and I'm trying to see how that works out, reading that kind of book on a Kindle. It's been good so far. I tend to take notes for it on a app like Notepad or something like that, just keep it on the side when something catches my attention or something I want to make sure to talk about later in a situation like this. So, but that's worked out well so far.
I'm so glad that we have sort of all of the strategies. We didn't plan that, but I was super curious what Tim and Chris, what a Kindle or an Audible listener does. The one book that I just listened to, Think Again, I had to go buy because I wanted a paper copy to take notes. And like Kyle, I get to a spot and I want to flip back and I want to look for like some triggers for me because I'm a very visual learner and I can't flip in Audible, right? I'm like, I want to grab that quickly. A lot of what Lisa talked about resonates with me for a few reasons. First, I star anything in my notebook that I have to come back to. So when you said you start, I was like, yep, I have asterisks all over the place. So I'm listening to an Audible book that was recommended to me by Brian, who couldn't join us today, but we'll be back next time, called The Secret Art of Note-Taking. I think I will confirm it. How to Take Smart Notes. I wasn't close at all. You would have had a hard time finding it. How to Take Smart Notes. And it talks about a slip box. So I'm just going to spend a minute going over this. Now, the goal for this person that wrote the book is for people who want to write books in the future. So this was all about somebody who wants to write nonfiction books. But I would dare say that every human on this call has a capacity in some way of producing content. So I think this book was written a few years ago. And so I think this notion is really good for anybody who has to develop content. And the idea is sort of aligned with what Lisa said. We all said we grab bits and pieces, like whether or not you take a note in the book or note on a piece of paper. He would call these fleeting notes, right? This is just an idea, but it turns into a permanent note when you put it someplace that you're going to reference it later. And the best permanent note is, like Lisa said, when you add your own idea to it, right? Because then it's not just a list of quotes that you can put as a quote on LinkedIn, but a new idea that you can kind of add to it. So I find that super interesting. We just started using Notion for my stealth mode project, and I still take fleeting notes in my book. So I usually walk and read at the same time. My neighbors make fun of me because I've always got a pencil. I'm taking notes in the book, but those are fleeting notes that turn into permanent notes when I move them into Notion. So anyway, thanks for playing my game with that. So here's the index card. I didn't write in that book because I already had all my daughter's notes in the book. So this time on my walk, like this is legit. This is what happens when Marnie goes for a walk. I take these notes. So the first thing I wanted to ask about for Leaders Eat Last is the notion of trust. I felt like so much of the book was about, prior to that. Sorry, I didn't ask big idea first. So Leaders Eat Last. I'll go around the horn in reverse this time. So Kyle, you'll be last. Big idea that you got from the book, or sort of your synopsis of it, Chris?
I guess one big idea I took from the book is a statement that it just kind of leapt off the page to me is the idea that the goal of a leader is to give no orders. I think it mentioned, and just that struck a chord with me personally, because I think all the worst jobs I've had fail that test. Like that. If you can set up a situation for people in your organization where they know what they need to do and feel responsible for that thing, but you don't give them some sort of order about it, but give them a direction and an intent, I think is how the book described it, and then give them responsibility for that and let them take care of it. I think that's a hallmark of a healthy organization that really I would like to reproduce. That just hit me particularly.
Yeah, that's a good one. Tim, how about you? You're muted.
On mute here and pretend like you can actually hear my sign language. So.
We can all lip read quickly after.
Well, Ray's not here, so somebody has to be you're on mute, Ray. So yeah, with all my years in the military and how I've always approached things in life, sort of one of the concepts that resonated with me from the book was learn the job of the person above you and teach your job to the person below you. And so I've spent a lot of my life and a lot of my career consuming knowledge, but then making sure I'm transferring that knowledge, or I'm teaching those below me, as far as pick any topic for that matter, and teaching those below me, I think, has been something that's really resonated with me in this book. Yeah, I'm the leader, I eat last, and I need to make sure my team, my company, my employees, my friends, they're well taken care of. They have that safety of trust. They have what they need to do their job and be successful. And if they don't, and I can educate them on that, then that's how I'm going to approach it.
Well, and how much of that, from a purely technical, right? So much of that is trust, which we'll obviously get into in a minute. But how much of that is also documentation and paperwork? I mean, the reality of, if you're really going to do that, yeah, you want to answer that?
I mean, I built a documentation platform, right?
Yeah.
That is literally how I live and breathe my life.
But tell me, I mean, they're not a far stretch. You have to have both the human piece, but also the process piece in order to be able to pass, right?
Well, see, I mean, the process is only as good as the humans to support it, right? And that's how I always approach everything. Have a champion, give them the tools to be successful. And if that's a tab A into slot B into step 7, have the process to back that up. But if the human doesn't understand the why, if the human doesn't understand the reasoning, I don't care what
looks like a slot B or a slot 7.
Right. And so where at least the teaching aspect, this is the why. And it's something that I've really struggled with a lot of my career, in my IT career for that matter, is I'm just going to go do it. Now I'm completely different approach is explain the why, get the buy-in. People are willing to make change if they understand the why behind it. And then you back it up with the policies and procedures. So when I look at leaders eating last, right, making sure that the health and well-being of our staff, the health and well-being of our friends or family or whatever is taken care of first, right? The hierarchy of basic needs. That as you flow through that hierarchy, having buy-in, having the understanding, being able to but to help them understand this is why we're doing this stuff, and then all the policy, procedure, and documentation to support that.
Yep. Lisa, how about you?
Well, it's interesting reading this book now, and then I have to flip back before I had my business when I was working with a company, because I made sure that my staff sees I can walk the talk. I can get my hands dirty. And the reason for that is because that builds that trust line between them and me. And with that trust line, if I was to take time away to go on vacation or have surgery or something, they know they can pick up the ball and go forward. And they know this is what's in Lisa's eyes. But the other thing is like Tim just said, the why, if you have your staff or your technicians or even subcontractors understand your eyes and why, then you're not going to have that one employee or person go off and do their own thing, and then you have to clean up the pieces. One of the big cases that I always talk about was the time that I had a holiday dinner or a holiday meal with my staff of 15. They decided they wanted to do it. I said, okay, we'll put it on the card and everything like that. And it was so interesting how every one of them kept pushing me to go first in line. I'm like, no, this is about you, because if it wasn't for you, we wouldn't be here. I wouldn't be here. And you see how I just went, you, we, then I.
Yeah.
I'm last, because it's not about me. It's about my team. And I say that even today because I don't have that large of a team, but you know what? I do. I have Tim, I have Marnie, I have Ray, I have Microsoft, I have all these people. And so when I can have that trust line between those people to my company, that's what's going to make me successful. So hearing and reading about this, I was like, man, I wish I had my staff read that many years ago. It really didn't come to light until I decided it was time to separate from that company.
Yeah.
And I happened to have a lunch with one of my right-hand guys that worked for me. And he goes, you shouldered a lot of stuff. You protected us. And I said, then I did my job.
Yeah. Kyle, how about you?
Why do I gotta follow? Why do I have to be last? These are all great.
Leaders eat last, so maybe I was just
I'm a huge fan of Simon Sinek. Everything, like all his talks, all his stuff, resonate really clearly with me. And this book is no exception. A lot of the stuff is how I try to go about how I lead in areas that I am a part of. I'm required to lead, or I'm just kind of thrust in that position or whatever. But one of the things that really stood out to me that kind of encapsulated the stuff I at least try to do every day, but I don't know, I'm not always successful, is servant leadership. It's the core premise is you put the team above yourself, right? That's what it is. But I think something better about it is the goal isn't to accumulate wealth or power. It's just to allow your team to succeed, and that is something I'm extremely passionate about, is watching others succeed, regardless of where they're at. That's why I'm a part of the community. That's why I do what I do. That's why I'm here. I want to help others be better. And if I'm not doing that, I don't know what I'm going to be doing. So I try to do that as much as possible. And it's really important, I feel, that those who have the position, the experience, the authority, to be able to make those decisions to help others, because as humans are societal in nature, and we all have our little mini communities inside of bigger communities. We have our friend groups, right? Everyone has that, and we rely on them. They're in our circle of what do you call it? Circle of safety, and it's there's different circles in different areas depending on what you're doing and where you're at, and it's important to foster those. And anytime someone is successful, if I've helped them or not, I'm always super happy.
So you mentioned a word there that gave me a thought. You said authority, and I can remember having some conversation where I said, I don't really care if I have the authority, because if you're a good leader, you automatically have some innate power, right? Like when you build that trust, that servant leadership. So which kind of builds into the trust piece. So how, if others, it's sort of, if others trust you, they will follow you, whether or not you are designated the leader, right? That is how I think many of us end up in businesses. People have just decided to follow until you end up like, oh, I think I'm running this thing type of way. So what in this book about trust necessarily resonated in the way you work? Or I always think the counterexample is interesting, right? Someplace where without trust, what happens? Any takers on that one?
I'll start, mainly because of something Lisa said, about how one of the ways she builds trust is she walks the walk. And sadly, sometimes that's not always the case. You're not, so, there's massive businesses, right? You go into a leadership position at a Fortune 500 company, you're not going to be able to do everything that they do. So showing an understanding and being and willingness to learn at least some aspects of something you don't know, will allow you to foster that trust with those who you lead. And it's important to emphasize, that you want to learn and actually learn, right? Don't just pretend. You have to show willingness to understand, because there's been stuff I've written processes and procedures for that I've never done a day in my life, but I've gone to them and been like, this is what I think should happen. Where am I wrong? And I don't mind being wrong. In fact, me being wrong means I'm learning something. So I'm happy to do that. And not only that, but there's been times where I haven't done a role in years, and I've done the role. Like, not much has changed since I've done the role, but I still don't, assume I know everything is still happening the same way I did it when I did. So I will go and be like, hey, look, here is the situation. Here's how I did it and expect it to go, or here's the situation, or whatever I want to do. Is there anything changed or different that I need to know about? And being willingness to be vulnerable to something you may not know is absolutely critical in establishing trust. And not enough people are vulnerable to those that they lead.
So I was literally going to say it was vulnerability, which is that is absolutely a component. I just read, so you triggered a few other books that I've recently just read, Think Again, and then Dare to Lead. So Think Again's Adam Grant, and Dare to Lead is Brene Brown, that really speak to, it doesn't matter what your position is, but if you can be vulnerable, right, that will allow people to build that trust. Anybody else? Any thoughts on trust or vulnerability?
Yeah, I was, one of the things I took away from it, I think, is that a lot of it comes from honesty, the trust thing. And I think that was that the last book we did with the Getting Naked dealt with that too, with the being honest builds trust. I admit, as I started reading this one, I was a little skeptical about some of the things that they were saying. It was painting this picture of, like, if we just make a nice company, everything will work out fine, And I've been in companies that talked like that, but it's not true. And so that was one of the things that I felt like I could really take as something that mattered and you could actually use afterwards is you can try to build a nice company, and but if you're honest about everything that's happening and build that trust, then that's even more important, I think, and it will foster trust and empathy and all these other things that build success.
So it's interesting to say that when I was in education, there was a phrase that some leaders would love their students to failure. And I went to a football game the year after. So I'd been assistant principal at the high school, and a dozen folks came and gave me hugs. And my husband said, so this isn't looking like the average group of folks that would come and give an assistant principal hugs. Who are all of these people? And I said, well, I've suspended almost all of them. And he was like, so why are they giving you hugs? And I said, because what they really want is some accountability and appreciate, like they wanted the consistency of, I will love you even if you do something wrong, and I will hold you accountable for it. And I'm not giving you a pass because you can be better than that. Right. So it's the honesty to say, like, being honest doesn't mean always, like, you're not just, don't take my kindness for weakness. I can be kind and love you and still tell you that you have walked off campus during the school day and we'll go spend time in school suspension. That's the rule, right? That is the way we go.
That's the rule.
And they are now, that's been 10 years, and they will still, when they see me on the street, tell me that they appreciated that, the authenticity of, like, you love us for who we are, but you hold us accountable to a higher standard. And I think that's important.
A lot of people struggle with that.
I was gonna say, yeah, you're right. So, and I didn't mean to interrupt you,
No,
Kyle.
you're
So,
good.
yeah, it might be a little bit of a religious quote, but speaking the truth in love, right, is something that kind of we live by here, a family mantra. Like, yeah, they know our kids, whatever, our family, they know we love them, but being able to speak the truth to them, not pamper them, baby them, whatever, not be a jerk or crass or everything else, but being able to find that balance of saying, like, we're going to hold you accountable for the things that you said you wanted to be held accountable for. We're going to guide you through that appropriately, but we're going to love you along the way, right? We're going to support you along the way. And so when I look at our staff, maybe I have a staff member struggling with X, Y, or Z, like, I don't care if you complete the ticket or not. Tell me what's going on.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Getting on those either weekly stand-ups or daily stand-ups and hearing, I mean, we're not dumb people. We can hear frustration in our coworkers and in our friends and in our staff's voice. Being, I guess, empathetic or in tune to that. And I'll be the first to admit, I'm not really good at that. This is why my wife and I make a really great team, because she's usually there tugging on my shoulder, letting me know, oh, there's more to the story.
Yeah.
And so when I get in these conversations, I put in the back of my head, and actually I have a little piece of paper on my desk here that says, there's more to the story.
Mhm.
And so, it just sits there kind of on my desk and reminds me to, like, try to be more empathetic and ask what's going on.
I love
On that, to expand on that a little bit, not just in management or internal frustrations, anything you deal with, you should always remind yourself that there's more to the story. If, like, you get a customer complaint, there's more to the story.
you see something on social media.
Right. But one of the things I've noticed, I'm not sure if everyone else shares this experience, but a lot of the newer leaders inside, newly promoted or what have you, they struggle with the discipline aspect of being a manager. And a lot of,
Be a friend.
yeah, a lot, and all the business books, like even this one, doesn't really have a ton of, you should make sure to discipline and hold everyone accountable in it. And a lot of them are like, you should lead with, like, you should eat last, and you should, put in trust in be honest and get naked with your staff, and, figuratively speaking, please.
Yes.
And, build that, build the, everyone should be comfortable with everyone.
Yeah.
But no one talks about that. You should, it's okay to eat last and discipline when someone needs discipline, or hold accountable someone that needs to be held accountable. And writing someone up, having a discussion that's in the negative, that's okay. That is allowed. Please. It's and it made it like an experience thing. Like, you don't have, because me personally, I've only fired one person in my entire life. It was the worst thing I've ever done. But if I had to do it again, I would. But I mean, that's the situation. Like, it was just time, and that individual, because I've kept track, is really successful. He's he's gone on to do a lot of cool things, and that situation is, it's okay to put yourself, and it goes back to the vulnerability. It's okay to be vulnerable. If you have someone you want to talk to about that, do. But it's okay to discipline your staff and those that you lead.
And I think part of the vulnerability is to be able to have the conversation, and same with customer success. The more you can be proactive, the less you will have to be reactive, right? So I've had to fire a few also, definitely the worst days. That is never any fun. And the last time that I did it, however, the person wasn't surprised at all, because we'd had conversations along the way about how they weren't meeting the expectations, right? So if you're honest enough along the way about, we're all aiming for, that's why KPIs are important. I'm not one to just jot down a KPI for the sake of a KPI, but if our core values are aligned to our mission and purpose, and we've got numbers that are tracking toward that, when you're not hitting those numbers, the conversation is a lot easier, right? And to get them to express that, I think, is important, to your point, Kyle, right? Because then it's less of like, I'm blindsiding you because you had no idea I was keeping these secret numbers and you didn't hit any of them.
Yes,
Right?
please.
Much easier if they weren't secrets.
Yeah, emphasis on indicator, right? And
Right.
KPIs, key performance indicator.
Yeah.
Go ahead. What was that? What was that? There's more to the story.
Exactly. No, I think you make a really good point. I know you were talking both you and Kyle a little bit like about letting employees go and that kind of stuff. And that's difficult, right? That's a really challenging aspect of being a business leader, being a business owner, or being in management, right? And so, I've faced these challenges. I'm a pretty autonomous, kind of manager, leader, whatever. Like, I set the expectations. I give them their indicators. They're not secrets. These are things that we work together to strive for the greater good of whatever we're doing. And then I'm hands off, and I check in. I do my stand-ups. I get, whatever, the good, bad, the ugly, the L10s, whatever. But, there have been periods in my career where I've been in a position where, I take the human, I give them the horse and I lead them to the water and I stuff their face in the pond and I do everything that I can.
Like we know where this one is going.
Right? Micromanagement down to literally every day and a half-hour stand-up every single day with the one-on-one, getting to the point where it's like, all right, now we're going to put in a PIP in place. Now we're going to put the things that HR say we need to be doing and follow through that. And it gets ugly and it gets emotional, right? And one of the things that I think we can bring to, MSP leaders, to business owners of MSPs, is try to separate the emotion from the fact.
Yeah.
And that's very difficult to do. Thank goodness Maureen my wife helps me a lot with that. And being able to separate, here's what you agreed to do. Here's where you're not doing those things. Here's what we've agreed to help you to do those things. Literally separating the fact from the emotions, because when we use statements like I, you, that negativity, like it's not helpful. It's not helpful enough.
So it's interesting you say that, because, that was sort of segued into letting someone go. What's the opposite of that? Like, so Lisa, I'll start with you. If you have something, don't feel like you have to. In interviewing, what is something that maybe a precept from this book would make you think like, oh, this is something I should ask about in advance? And as a side note, Kyle, you said you follow Simon Sinek everywhere, as do I. So on LinkedIn the other day, he said one of the interview questions he asks is, I don't like surprises. What might happen that would surprise me, and what would be a warning? So he loves the answers he gets from that. So Lisa, I'm curious if there's anything that you read that triggered like, oh, I should find that out about somebody before they start working with me, because like my core value is X, Y, or Z, and they hate that. And boy, would I love to have known that ahead of time.
Well, I don't know if this is something I do. So it might be a little bit off base here a little bit. And I got a lot of this practice when I worked with a previous company, and also in lifeguarding and stuff. And I'm bringing up lifeguarding because you have to imagine when you're sitting at a pool or on the beach, being the lifeguard, you have everybody's life in your hands, even though they're out gallivanting and doing things. But the one thing is this is how I can decipher who's going to be a good lifeguard and really who's not. And the same thing, what I've learned of who could be a good person for our organization or not. Why don't you start off the interview by asking them about their growing up? Get to ask them that question. We do that, if you think about it, we actually do that when we start going out and dating or meeting our mates. What do? Yeah. We ask them about themselves and where they come from. And this is how you can decipher one in this kind of segues. Is this person going to give me a great detail of how they grew up, or are they going to give me something very short and simple? And that is going to tell me if they're a detailed type of person, depending on that job, then that could be a good fit. But if they're very short and simple, then you're wondering what tragedies could have occurred, what could be this, what could be that. Nobody has a perfect growing up. but getting personal, and I guess that's how I start off my interviews. I actually will take a resume and turn it upside down. And I just sit there, tell me about yourself. Tell me your goals. Don't tell me what's on this.
Because that alignment is sort of, I think, something that speaks to all of the trust piece, et cetera.
Yeah.
Right.
So that's basically what I tend to do. And then of course you have your regular pointed questions, and then it leads into if there's going to be a second interview and things like that. But when you start off an interview, what have you just done? You're now creating a trust atmosphere.
When you're helping build what the culture is
Yeah.
going to look like, which I think is a good bit of what he speaks to in all of his writings. And sometimes I speak to his other writings, so because all of his stuff for me
They're very similar. Yeah.
they are very similar. Yeah. I mean, so one of the questions we ask is a hot dog a sandwich, which immediately says something about the way it's going to be like to live.
The answer is yes.
Yeah. Thank you.
There's bun, there's bread,
Two
there's
bread,
middle,
thing in
it's
between, sandwich.
My
That's
favorite-
the
I have two
literal
favorite
definition.
answers. One was a cousin to a taco. I was like, okay, solid. The other was it's a Schrodinger sandwich. It's both is and isn't a sandwich. Although my favorite response to it was somebody asked what the company thought of it, and I replied, "Sir, we don't give out company secrets until you sign an NDA." He ended up with a job because he took that joke. Like, if you couldn't take that joke right away,
That's a great joke.
Not going to work.
Right.
So,
I have a couple of questions that I asked, depending on the role. Because like I work for an MSP, so a lot of our hires tend to be those who work tickets, right, or projects, things that involve complex, things to resolve. So the question I generally ask them, and it's worked really well, is I would like you to explain to me in 60 seconds max anything you want.
Yeah.
There's no conditions other than it has to be within a minute. Tell it whatever you want it to be: cars, programming, how to fish, whatever you want it to do. Because a lot of times, the reason I ask that is a lot of people are very uncomfortable in an interview process, and you can ask them technical questions and they're immediately nervous. But if you give them an option to explain to you something that they immediately relate to, a hobby, something they are intimately comfortable with, they are in their own circle of trust, and they begin to relax. And a lot of times it's about 50-50, but a lot of them don't make it within 60 seconds. But I had someone explain to me how to change brakes on a car that he has. It was something he had recently done.
Nice.
And I'm talking, he went down to the individual sockets he used. He's like, you need a 17 size to do this, and you need a 15 to do this. And like, that shows to me that he has an easy, because he can explain to me, someone who has no familiarity with vehicles. He's comfortable in what he knows how to explain. So when he's talking to a client and he's explaining a situation to a client that's occurring, he can explain to them in a way that will impart knowledge, but not overwhelm them. And there's like just a ton of information you can gather just from that quick little thing that puts them in a comfort zone to allow them to be able to elaborate. The other thing, which is kind of from the aspect of a leadership position, is how does a leader's commitment to the well-being of their team and staff that they're in charge of relate to the long-term, well-being and success, profitability of the organization? Because generally in the situation, you're going to be their leader. So you're asking them how you would be, how they would want you as a leader, right? You're asking them to tell you how to lead them. And you can get a lot from that as well, because they're generally not prepared for leadership questions like that, right? And it's a good fun back and forth that I think. And sorry, Tim, I didn't mean to steal yours.
Well, mine's slightly different. But it was along the similar lines, right? So we have 3 questions depending on the role, right? One of the ones that I pretty much ask everybody is, can you describe to me when you prioritized the well-being of a teammate, a colleague, or whatever over your own interests or beliefs, and what motivated you to do that? So that helps me understand their mindset of leaders eat last, right? It helps me understand, like, are you putting the needs of others before yourself? And depending where they are on that spectrum, we can obviously make some interview judgments around that. I hate to use the word judgment, that's wrong. The second question that we ask is, in less than a minute, tell me how to put a seatbelt on.
Well, it's good to know the level of detail, right? To Kyle's point, also the way they explain it and how they explain it. I think as a teacher, it's super important. So I love those.
Yeah, and the last one is, which one kind of throws, and I used to do, when I used to hang out at the bars and restaurants and drink all that, like, this was always the icebreaker, which was, if you could hang out with any one person in all of history from the moment of the bang till today, who would it be and why?
That tells you a lot about a human, for sure.
Yeah.
It's been that, when I've sat at bars and restaurants or whatever, like that conversation with just somebody off the street, because I don't care what you do during the day. I want to know who you are as a person.
Oh, that reminds me. So there's a girl there are a couple books on this now too, but Kelsey O'Connor, she graduated from NC State. She did her graduation speech was on who you are rather what you do, right? Like, so I'm not an engineer, I'm a problem solver, that type of thing. It's a really good little YouTube video if you're interested. So I have one question for everybody. We'll do kind of rapid fire to wrap up. What is something maybe you heard today from someone or read in the book that you want to implement, right? We've talked about it before. Like, if we're going to read these books, we should do something with them other than take notes and put them in our slip box or whatever. So what's something that you want to walk away with from this? Chris, can I start with you?
Sure. Yeah, I think I liked the term that I read in the book. It was long-term greedy, I think was the phrase that they used, having a big picture for, the fact that you might do something that's a sacrifice in the short term, but is a trust building and is actually, going to be long-term beneficial to you. Try to have that long game, I guess, for success, So yeah, I'm going to try to be long-term greedy.
I like it. Lisa, how about you?
I'm still searching, but I think this might have helped me. I want to be able to read people better to build a better trust. That's the key thing. I'm running into a roadblock right now on that. I seem to be behind the 8 ball. I'm not afraid to fire. I'm not afraid to cut up a contract. It's not my worst day. Actually, it's my happiest day.
Yeah, sometimes, right?
I'm sorry, you fire yourself. I like I said, like you said, Kyle, you've only fired one person. I'm the same way. I've only fired one person, but they actually fired themselves. But I just helped them to get the last foot out the door. But yeah, I think that's a lot of it is I think our level in trusting others has really dropped greatly, or has got a very wide berth. And I think a lot of that is because of our current environment. But as I look at it, I want to be able to read people to build that trust a little bit better at the get-go when it comes to clients.
Nice. Tim?
Yeah, I mean, I have a bunch. I think I'm going to kind of narrow it down to kind of 2 key aspects. First, trying to learn how to be more empathetic, right? It's not a natural trait of who I am. And books like Radical Candor and Leaders Eat Last have really helped with being more empathetic. So that would be the first bucket. And the second bucket is now as a new, startup co-founder, literally wearing every single hat, like trust in the delegation. Not every job is my job. And I mean, I learned that lesson yesterday where my marketing team came back and was like, no, Tim, this is not your thing. And I was like, okay, you're right. Trust in the delegation. I mean, you'd think after, 13 years in the military, having to delegate stuff, I'd still have that. But fast forward, it's still a struggle sometimes to trust in the delegation of the people that I empowered to do their job and do it well.
Kyle?
So what I'm going to do, I'm also going to challenge everyone else to do who's watching and who's here.
Yeah.
One of Simon Sinek's
Hmm.
things that he mentions, which makes like the best sense in the entire world and is absolutely true, but it just doesn't click until someone says it. No one trains their managers to be leaders. They don't train them how to the leadership aspect. They train them how to do the job. They train them how to do the tasks that the managerials require, but they don't train them how to do things like conflict resolution and how to have conversations that are serious, how to build goals. Like no one trains them on that aspect. So I started this back in November at my MSP, and I'm going to take this and start working on a training aspect to the middle managers we have with this book specifically. So that's what I'm going to do. And I would challenge everyone who's listening to at least begin the process if you don't already have a method to train your managers, because they are super important. They are absolutely critical to your business, and you ignore them from the most important perspective. Not accident, like it's accidental. It's not like purposely, right?
And I'll wrap that up with, I think the term manager versus leader is very different. I've said to people before, I don't care what title you give, but don't put manager in it because I don't want to manage anything. It sounds like micromanaging, but I'd rather lead, last, who would be fine by eating last. So I love that. So I'll take that challenge for sure. I think that is thinking about how to train other people to be leaders is a fantastic goal. Well, thanks all. We will put at the end of the live stream in the chat, the poll. So we've already voted for next time, but we're open for a month. We'll send out the poll so that folks can vote for the next book. But for next month, which will be the end of November, it is They Ask You Answer by Marcus Sheridan. Any marketers in the world should take note. It's all about educating the market to sort of become the thought leader and the trusted advisor, which is always the elusive trusted advisor. So thanks all for joining, and get your They Ask You answers together, and we will see everybody in a month.
Sounds good.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye.
Thanks, everybody. Awesome.
This has been a broadcast of the MSP Media Network.